Hi. So I understand the next bit's in English. So, okay. So my name is Eric Shinwell. Can we do a very quick name and which country you're from?
America.
America. Where in America?
Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
Danny, England.
England. Where?
London.
Oh dear.
Harvey, and also United Kingdom, London.
Also from London. Okay.
I'm from Long Island, New York.
Okay.
It is.
There it is.
Joseph from London.
Oh, 4 from London. Only 1 American. All right.
2 Americans.
2 Americans. Sorry. Baltimore and Long Island. Right. Okay. And 3 Brits. Okay. So, where's my accent from?
Scotland.
Very good.
So you don't have much of a Scottish accent.
No, you're right. It's got less over the years. So, I'm happy to have this as an open conversation.
South Africa also with us.
Oh yeah. Hi, South African. What's your name? Josh.
Josh, yeah.
Josh, can you hear me? No. Maybe you're on mute. All right. So, what I suggest we do is I'll tell you a little about who I am and my personal history. But most of the time, I think we'll spend with you guys talking or asking questions, okay? So, who am I now? Apart from being a husband, a father of 4 children and 12 grandchildren. We live here in the north of the country. We live in Rosh Pina, and I run the neonatal intensive care unit in Tzfat in Ziv Hospital. I've been here for 7 years, and I am also the Dean of Medical Education of the Bar-Ilan University faculty in Tzfat. So I have two lives. Don't have much time for sleep, but that's okay. And so a little bit about personal history. As the Brits at least got, I'm from Scotland. I was born in Glasgow, and I was brought up in a setting where there were quite a lot of Jews in Scotland. There were, at the time I was a child, there were somewhere between 10 and 15,000. Today there are only about 2,000. And that's a little bit different from London, where you have lots of Jews and there's a critical mass. In Scotland, there is a lot of anti-Semitism. If we have time, I can tell you. Also in London.
A lot.
Okay. That's interesting, actually, because many Jews in London say, oh, we don't feel the anti-Semitism. We do. Okay. Well, I certainly did. Felt it physically and emotionally as a child. And then between high school and university, I was here in Israel for a year. And I actually considered staying here to study, but in the end, for all sorts of reasons, went back to study. I qualified in medicine from King's College Hospital in London. So I know London a bit. And in the meantime, got married to Shula, who is, and we've been married for 42 years, and which is not bad. A few more to go. And in 1979, after we finished studying, we came on Aliyah, that is made Aliyah for the Americans, and we'd had a shaliach who said to us, where do you think you should go? And there had been a television program in Britain, which I think still exists, called Panorama, which had done a television program about the new medical school in Beersheba, which was trying to do some new things and to try to get out to the community and create a more concerned, caring sort of doctor. And I kind of liked that idea. And the Shaliach said, yes, you should definitely go either to the Negev or to the Galil. Don't go anywhere in between, because there's plenty of people there. And if you want to make a difference and do something useful, then go to either the Negev or the Galil. So we went to the Negev. We ended up in the Galil, but we went to the Negev. and we went to Beersheba. And after about a year, two big guys came into the room where I was in the hospital. One was Tzvi Hendel, who you may know the name of. Tzvi Hendel was a Chaber Knesset, and he was a minister, and he was from Gush Katif. You all know about the history of Gush Katif? Okay, so Tzvi Hendel was one of the two people, and the other person was Reuven Rosenblatt, who at the time was the head of the local Moitza, the head of the local council of Gush Katif. And they told me a story. They said, you know, in the Gaza Strip, there are 3 moshavim. At the time, there were only 3. There are 3 moshavim, and they're all young couples, young families with children, and there's no doctor. There's no medical care. And whenever anyone is sick, we either have to go all the way into like Netivot or Ofakim or somewhere which is quite far away, or if it's an emergency, go to an army base and see whatever doctor is there. Now, the doctor might be a psychiatrist or a dermatologist or anyone, and they were often quite useless. And he said they're desperately looking for a doctor. And we were a young couple who we had one daughter, and we were time when Yael was born there. Cal was born in Beersheba.
How old were you when you moved to Israel?
23. Because I didn't have army, so I was medical school. I went from high school my year here, and then I'd skipped a year in high school. So that's why I was a bit younger.
You were a doctor already?
Yeah, because I skipped a year in school, and also school is there's no army, and it was actually my year was the first year of the 5-year curriculum. Britain has a 5-year curriculum, so I was qualified when I was 23. Anyway, we came to Gush Katif, to Netzach Hazani. At the time, there were just 3 Yishuim. There was Netzach Hazani, Katif, and Gan Eital. And we met a lot of really lovely people who were not interested in any particular type of politics. They were interested in settling Eretz Israel and doing agriculture and bringing up their families. And they were good people, and they had no doctor at all. And I was doing my training. I'm a pediatrician, so I was doing my training in pediatrics. And what they asked was that they would give us a house to live in if we stayed there, and I would work during the day in the hospital in Beersheba, and in the evenings do a clinic for all the people. And to cut a very long story short, we spent 4 years in Gush Katif. I set up the clinic and provided services for everything for everybody during those 4 years. And the reason we left was not because we didn't love the place. We were absolutely, totally in love with the place. But I was going to go on to do specialist training in America to become a specialist in preterm babies and such like things. So we didn't have, you can't be on call for intensive care an hour away from the hospital. You have to be close by. But we had the experience of setting up a clinic and a service for people, and we also had our second child. And I'm going to skip a lot in between because we don't have that much time. Came back, we had 2 more children. One is here, and in 2013, I was 57 years old, and I was head of a big department, and I had a research program, and I was doing very well. And then 2 people came to me to talk to me. One was from the hospital in Tzfat, and the other was from the Faculty of Medicine, the medical school. And basically the story was that the hospitals newborn department was in a terrible state, and they desperately needed someone to take it over and to change it and to develop it. And the other was the Faculty of Medicine looking for people who could help raise the Faculty of Medicine. And we decided, my wife and I, Shula and I, decided that we had done a number of good things along the way, but this was a real opportunity to do something different, because the North is very starved of high quality medical care. And the medical school here is trying very hard to set up a new style of doctor, a doctor who's more caring, a doctor who understands how difficult it is, a doctor who will stay here in the North and provide care on a different level. And today the neonatal unit in the hospital is on an internationally successful level. And the medical school is doing really well. We have over 600 students, and there's a lot going on. There's a million stories there I could have added in between, but I want to stop and give you a chance to either comment or ask questions. Feel free.
How is it like moving back and forth? Like, you know, you're in Israel, you're out of Israel, in Israel, out of Israel.
Okay.
How was that? Like,
it wasn't actually that difficult. It's really only one move out of Israel. We went to America for 3 years because to get really good quality high training at that time was very difficult in Israel. There really wasn't much available. Today there is. I'm not sure I would have gone abroad if it was today. But at that time, we went to Rochester, New York, which was one of the leading universities in America in my field. And I worked there for 3 years. And after that, we came back. So it's really only once. We did go on sabbatical once to America as well. Not to Baltimore, not to Long Island. Why do you ask about how was it difficult?
no, I figured going back and forth while raising a family, it's kind of a haggle. Plus, you're in school,
You
so
just the kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
No.
I think it's harder for the father than the kids. He has to take care of the kids too. Well, you know.
Well, it was challenging. Shula, my wife, worked as an English teacher in the local Jewish school. And our daughters learned English to a really high standard because they were in a regular school in America. Even though they learned it with the wrong accent, but there you go. And it probably cost us quite a bit of money going back and forth because you have to set up house, and then you have to set up house again. But we decided it was worth it, and it was worth it. There was no question it was worth it because it meant we could do things on a much higher level. Yes?
I got a question about, like, when you were setting up the clinic, is it, because I know that the UK is all national, like, paid, so, like, was it a private clinic? Did you have to pay to set that stuff up, or, like in America, for example, if you're opening a clinic, or was it like, were you supported by the government when you tried to do that to increase the medical standards in that area?
Okay, so do you know what Kupot Cholim are?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are 4 Kupot. The majority of the services in places out of the way, like Gush Katif, are run by Klalit, which is the biggest one. So this was a Klalit clinic. I didn't have to, it wasn't private, it was a Klalit clinic, but Klalit wasn't particularly interested in developing it the way I saw it ought to be. So I begged, borrowed, cried to the Moitza. The Moitza agreed to fund a laboratory assistant so that she could do throat cultures and blood tests and so on in the Gush, so that if I wanted a blood test or a throat culture, they didn't have to travel an hour in every direction. The Moitza gave me things. The Kupa, when I begged more, they gave me a social worker time and a psychologist and a nutritionist and everyone for a few hours every week. But it made a huge difference because all of those things were things that people really needed, but they weren't available. And in reality, we were just as entitled. My main argument was, why should all these things be available to people living in town, but not to people living in a moshav who are doing something for the country? And it was very difficult for them to argue with me. And for equipment for the laboratory, I simply went and begged in the laboratory. I said, have you got any old equipment, like an old microscope or an old centrifuge or whatever? And they said, well, I think there's one in the cupboard and so on. And I would run away with things and put them in my car and bring it to the moshav. So, but it worked. Hey, you know. And when I handed it over to the person who took over from me, then it was already a functioning clinic. It was really good. Yes.
What do you think is relaxing today in the medical field that can improve on?
What do you
think is relaxed on today in the medical field that they can improve on?
I'm sorry, I'm missing the first word you're saying.
Lax.
What do you think they're lacking in?
Lacking, sorry.
American accent.
No, I have a hearing problem. What is lacking? Well, let me start by answering it slightly differently. I think the first thing that is worth recognizing about the Israeli medical system is what has just happened to us. We've just been through, or hopefully we are through, but maybe we're not completely through, a pandemic which many countries dealt with very badly, which their politicians dealt with badly, and which their medical services were not organized, didn't follow guidelines, and have disastrous results. Now, there aren't many explanations better than a good health service for why Israel's overall number of infections, an extremely low mortality rate. Why did all that happen? Because we happen to have a high quality service which is there for everybody. Nobody gets asked whether they have health insurance. They first of all get treated, and they get treated to the absolute top of what can be done for them. And that's not obvious. You two come from a country where that is definitely not obvious. Okay? In Britain, sort of, the National Health Service in Britain has been overwhelmed in many places because of cuts for years and years and years. And the reality is that although we complain about the Israeli medical system a lot, and we always want more, we always want to do better, the reality is we've just done pretty damn good. You know, that keep things in perspective. Could it be better? For sure it could be better. I'll change hats. I'm a researcher as well. There is very little research money, very little. And things could be advanced in all sorts of ways that could be better. Now I'll come back to the medical school. One of the big things that we work on in the medical school is what is termed social determinants of health. Okay, the social factors that influence how healthy or how sick people are. If you look at the level of health of the people around you in the north of the country, whether they be Jews, Arabs, Druze, whatever, Dati, Chiloni, whatever people, and compare them to the center of the country, the health here is much less. It's not as good. And it's not as good not because the people aren't healthy. It's not the basic thing. It's that services aren't the same. And many things get neglected. And bringing those services to people is a major challenge. So I'll give you an example from right now. Okay, during Corona, the government correctly said, stay at home, okay, and don't come to the clinic unless you absolutely have to. Don't come to the hospital unless you really have to. So people were afraid of Corona, rightly so. Nobody wanted to die of Corona. But it meant that people with other diseases, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart attacks, everything else, didn't go to their doctors and stayed at home and got sick. And a lot of people got very sick. So what are we doing right now? We got a grant. We asked an emergency grant from a big a big philanthropic foundation in America. No, not from Long Island, from New Jersey. Who gave us $500,000 to send students out to clinics all around the north, what to do, to sit in the clinic, get a list of people from the doctor who are chronic patients, people with diabetes and liver, all these diseases, and call them up.
quick question on that. Why does that cost $500,000? Like, why couldn't that just been done?
They also have equipment. We've also bought them little ultrasound machines, and also they spend a lot of hours doing it. You need to pay them. And we've sent 80 students all at once, so that's quite a lot of money. It's going to go on all through the summer.
Oh, so they pay students then?
For this, yes, they're getting paid. So what they're doing is they're calling up saying, "Hi, Mr. Cohen, how are you feeling?" And he's saying, "Well, I'm not too good, and there's this problem and that problem." And then they go out and do a whole visit and see what's actually going on. And if he's really unwell, then they'll take him to the hospital or the clinic or whatever. That sort of thing, there isn't enough of. There aren't enough of those sort of services to balance the inequalities. And those are inequalities which are really there. And whether it's in Kiryat Shmona or Chatzor or anywhere around, there are people getting less good care. So I don't know how well I've answered your question. Did you have something in mind when you asked the question?
Well, just wanted to see just where the healthcare line somewhere goes.
There's another thing. We're remarkably efficient if you can consider the number of doctors and the amount of money that's spent on health. There's a way of calculating how much a country spends on health. It's do you know what the gross national product means? Yeah. It's the overall amount of money that's available in the country. Okay, so America spends between 12 and 13% of its gross national product on health. Despite that, has problems. Britain spends between 10 and 11%. 9, 10, 11. We spend 7.5%, which is because we're not a wealthy country. But fact is, we're doing not bad.
Told them about the story about building up the corona department and seeing how quick.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. This was actually quite remarkable. Thanks for reminding me. Corona happened right now, okay, and the government said every hospital has to set up a corona department. So every hospital had to find some place within the hospital, move whatever is there out to somewhere else, and build a new department. Okay, and also in other departments like my intensive care unit to have rooms for corona patients within the intensive care unit that have special air systems and intercoms and cameras and all the rest of it. The department happened like that. It was like a miracle. It was amazing. They moved the cardiac rehabilitation unit and physiotherapy out to somewhere else and built 2 departments, one for serious patients, one for not serious patients, and with ventilators, monitors, and so on. Some of which was equipment taken from the departments, but some of which was bought brand new. And they put up walls like, you know, we need a wall here. The next day there was a wall there. It was simple, quick, but it happened. In my department, we have a special room for babies who are infected. It has a special negative pressure flow system and so on. And we started using it. And along came the first baby who was from a mother who was infected. And the doctor and nurse went in, they closed the double doors and so on. And then they realized that they didn't have something, so they wanted something. And then they realized that, oh, we've got no way of communicating with people outside. And they've just been through this whole business of getting dressed up and putting on all of the equipment and so on to go inside. So they had to come all the way back out and then get undressed and throw away all the equipment that they just wasted and so on. So we realized that we urgently needed a camera and a screen and a good intercom system so that we could communicate with them and so they could get more equipment or whatever. And I asked for it I happen to remember it was Wednesday morning, and it was there Wednesday afternoon. Someone ran off to shop and got the equipment and they put it in. And that is not the way the system normally works. But it was like you know, everyone's got to do it together, everyone's got to work together, and things have got to happen, and it happened. So, yes, next.
היית בנצר כשהרב הרמה היה שם?
הרמה, זיכרונו לברכה.
אני מאבני איתן, נצר חזני,
חלק באו אליך.
שליש מהם נמצאים אצלנו באבני איתן.
מי אצלכם?
בן אהרון שהיו.
בן אהרון, מרים?
כן, מרים, אבל היא נפטרה, אתה יודע.
כן.
עכשיו יש עוד הרבה, יש את מנצר, מילה מנצר.
טוב, אפשר אחר כך. כן.
יש חבר'ה. כרגע יש איזה 10 משפחות מנצר אצלנו.
כן. וגם, יש לנו חברים מנצר שהם בחספין עדיין. שנייד. שנייד ואנחנו היינו שכנים.
באים הרבה לבנתן, קשורים.
כן.
Quite close question.
Yes.
So if you don't mind. The medical teaching in Israel nowadays, the sources and all the stuff, is the course really based around English? Like, do the doctors need to learn English to be able to qualify, or is it all being translated, all the stuff into Hebrew?
Good question. All of the main textbooks are in English. In some fields, there are books that have been translated into Hebrew or have been written in Hebrew. There are some, but the majority are in English. But the teaching is all in Hebrew. That's not to say that. I mean, in the medical school in Tzfat, we have a few students from abroad who've managed to learn Hebrew along the way. Can be done. If you want to talk about that in more detail, we can talk later.
The foreign with Israel, I saw Nefesh posted on their Facebook page. They were looking for people, doctors, just people who finished medical school in America or wherever, to come to northern Israel to help with medical field.
Absolutely. There's a group from New York of doctors approaching retirement age who are trying to set up a little village within Tzfat for doctors and other academics to come and retire to and be able to contribute within the system, and I'm helping them try to find ways. They're looking for the money and how to do it. I'm helping them with trying to find ways to keep them busy here. I've got plenty for them to do, believe me. I'm told we need to finish.
שיפמן הכרת, נכון?
סליחה?
שיפמן.
מי זה שיפמן?
יואל שיפמן מנצר?
אולי אחרי השנים שלנו. אולי צעיר יותר.
ומפלורידה את דוקטור רוזנבלט? פרופסור רוזנבלט?
שמעתי את השם.
הוא היה אמור לבוא אליכם לבית ספר.